All right. You want to turn me back into the host? Cool. All right. See you on the flip side. And thanks, John. Appreciate everything.
that we've got for student outcomes. All right, we're going back. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Just want to point out for the public's point of view, we are live streaming now. We had a little issue at 11 o'clock that prohibited us from recording the start of the meeting. But now the meeting was called to order. So.
All right, great. So I think everybody's getting back into the room, and I'm going to ask Patty, we're going to take about 1 minute apiece to share out the different outcomes that our groups came up with so that we can maximize our time to hear from you all. And we're going to move into our next breakout shortly about strategic themes. There we are. All right, Patty, can you go ahead and share your screen? There we are. All right, so 1 minute report out. Let's go real fast here.
Is that me first, Patty?
That's
okay.
You.
So then we were still talking about ideas, but basically we want to look specifically at math for student outcomes in math, specifically for student outcomes in ELA for high school preparation. And then we had some other thoughts about discipline, about engagement, and about social emotional awareness in learning.
Okay.
Great.
Hold on, I lost my.
All right, who's next?
Sorry. Martha.
All right, great. So we had some really creative ideas. Ownership of learning and bridging the gap. We had several around specific subgroups, bridging the gap between economically disadvantaged and not, performance of students with disabilities, EL students, Hispanic students. We had a cluster of ideas around writing, literacy, public speaking. Also talked about math. Our group talked about attendance, ability to articulate the impact of learning outside of them. We also talked about social emotional competency, kindergarten preparation, progress for every child, 1 year of academic growth, successful transition to high school, and digital literacy.
Muriel.
Yeah, so we had a few pieces mentioned around achievement gaps, specifically for Hispanic students, and then for both math and ELA, and then some brought up growth and what that would look like. We also talked about restorative justice and discipline practices for equity across the district, and including culturally competent teaching, instruction, and practice. We also spoke about social and emotional learning and the wide scale, the full practices surrounding that and how those all connect. Students have language accessibility across curriculum, and students have technology skills and understanding.
Great. Okay. Our group talked again about math and about ELA, making sure that all students are achieving at least 1 year's growth during the academic year, that students are prepared for high school and beyond, that they become lifelong learners and are excited about coming to school and really feel a sense of belonging. We talked a lot about literacy spanning not just ELA, but in all subjects, and making sure that all subjects are contributing to learning of literacy. Okay. And Yanika.
All right. So we, some similar things came up. We also talked about math as well and the achievement gap there. We talked about SEL components and that focus for students. We talked a little bit about ELL and special education focus at the primary level and increases in support there. And then overall achievement focus at the primary grade level. We also talked about access and higher level of curriculum for students, especially socioeconomic students. And then we also talked about whole child focus. So what would those outcomes look like for real world experiences for students, for environmental focus, for art, living, all these other pieces for whole child focus.
All right, excellent. So let me share my screen, and I'm going to very quickly go over an explanation of what we're going to do next. And then we'll go back into our breakouts for our next round of conversation. So let me just zip down to where I need to be in my presentation. All right. So I think as we can see, this next thing is actually much easier to talk about, and the kind of things that most people think of when we start to think about planning and improvement is what we need to do. But we really believe we need to first ground it in what are the areas of student success that we want to address so that we make sure that the things we're selecting to do are really aligned with our mission. But now we want you to note some ideas for the aspect of the school district that you would address to improve student success. And so these can be things that need to be enhanced and leveraged. These can be things that need to be created anew that are not present. These can be things that need to be redesigned or enhanced or improved. So we want you to each, as we're getting kind of moving into our breakout groups, try to note for yourself 3 ideas. This is question 4 if you're using your worksheet. And then we'll use our maps again to create some visual images from each group and come back and share those. So at this point, we are ready to go back in our breakout groups. So everybody just accept that invitation to move back into your breakout group, and we'll keep moving. Finley, and it's not here yet. Okay, oops.
Yeah,
Well, we're going
we're
back.
doing it. I think that's captured it in the diverse deliberative PD, so through coaching as well.
All right, we're going to go back. So I'm going to just put this in here, early intervention. That's our last word for the day. And as I mentioned, this is a work in progress, but I think you guys have come up with some really good ideas here. So this ownership, EL, holistic assessment, math instruction, professional development, SEL, mental health, technical skills, early intervention. So we got a lot of good ideas to share. All right. We are on a race to the end of the meeting here. So thank you, everybody. What we're going to do really fast in another kind of 5-minute lightning round is share what we came up with. And then we're going to turn it over to Dr. Rudolph to make a few closing remarks. So Patty, can you go ahead and share your screen, and we'll just each kind of highlight what we have on our mind map.
All right, Erica, can we start with you?
Sure, sorry about being muted. So we didn't get an opportunity to really separate things out very much because we had just so much rich conversation and ideas that were flowing. But some of the things we had was differentiating goals between elementary students and middle school students, creating a process where student voice and choice are more prevalent in their own achievement paths. So one of the specific things we talked about were conferences where data is used with students to, determine what their goals are and just empowering them in their goal setting. Teaching executive functioning skills, a whole district SEL curriculum where there's specific standards so that there's teacher buy-in, which will then impact student outcomes. Sharing best practices across the district and really leveraging collaboration so that we can scale up things that are already successful at our sites, things that are existing. Increasing peer and university activities, and a large part of our conversation was around the fact that the parents in this district are very resourceful and they can really step in and help in areas that we're currently just not tapping into them for. But then also practical tips for parents across the board, increasing counselors as part of the SEL, expanding the RTI process so that it includes SEL and it's not just the academic RTI process. Partnerships and bridges with the high school districts to make sure that there's a clear understanding of what's next. And that includes bridges between the elementary and middle schools, leveraging outside research, differentiating for both teachers and for students, and potentially decreasing student tracking while maintaining high expectations for all students.
Okay. Unica.
All right. Okay. We too didn't quite get everything moved around, but there was great conversation. So there was conversation about SEL program consistency across the district and ensuring that happens. Also, there's a lot of conversation about students in transition, whether it's students coming in at the 4th grade and up. There was also pieces around high school preparation and just students that are transitioning into the district. There are a few things around decreasing this achievement gap. One was thinking about class size, also curriculum and standardizing that for math and making sure it's culturally responsive. Also dedicated resources for at-risk students. There was some conversation around teacher development and making sure there's differentiated PD for teachers, that teachers learn strategies around ELL and other programming. As well as an emphasis on decreasing the math gap. Parent support and parent engagement also came up, especially kind of in this time of COVID. Both computer support for parents who need support and help, just helping their students as well log on for digital learning. Curriculum support of how can parents help teach their students or teach their children at home. Also feedback, we need to be able to engage parents outside of just digital platforms and how do we engage them. And then the last thing was just around thinking about opportunity access for students in lower economic statuses and how do we provide opportunities for them.
Okay, Mirel.
Yes. So we talked about inclusive family environment and engagement, especially for families that don't speak English, diverse data collection, so outside of what we normally collect around student outcomes, differentiated instruction for students at different levels, so students who need support, and then those high achieving students. We also spoke about differentiated professional development, math curriculum and sequencing and reviewing that, and then the methods of teaching around math, support for students with dyslexia, incorporating ethnic studies into the current curriculum, and also incorporating culturally responsive teaching and celebrating cultures across curriculum, and then supporting enrichment opportunities, so not all schools have the same level of income from parents or support from parents to help support these activities, and then social and emotional learning.
Great. Okay, so I'm just going to mention a few things we haven't touched on with the others. There's a lot of overlap, but we talked about the role of equity and how the team really wants that infused in all of the activities and professional development that we do as a district and into the strategic plan. We talked a lot about ratios of counselors and teachers to kids, looking at response to intervention and response to instruction, and thinking about programs for all newcomers, being children who are coming in from outside the United States, and how to welcome them into our district. And Martha, I'm pulling yours up right now.
All right, excellent. So we had some similar categories. You can see my scribbles. I had a few challenges finding the right shapes. But that one where it says type something, that was really about building student ownership. And they had some specific ideas about how they might build ownership for students in their learning. Patty, if for some reason this is gray, I'm having a really hard time seeing it.
You have to click on it with your cursor and I think it'll go away.
No. Anyway, early intervention, and I think that's probably about the only thing that hasn't been mentioned. Technical skills. I think most of the other areas that our group talked about have already been referenced. Okay, so Patty, if you'll stop sharing, then I will go ahead and share my screen. And we have a closing slide that I am going to turn it over to Dr. Rudolph to talk through. And I just want to say, while we're kind of transitioning to that all of these ideas that you have discussed today will be captured. We will clean them up and organize them better. We know we were a little rushed in terms of getting things onto the board, but trust that all the ideas have been noted. And so we are going to take the time to synthesize and organize all of these ideas in order to share with the leadership team on Monday. So Dr. Rudolph, would you like to close us out by summarizing the next steps and then any other business you all need to take care of?
Yep, so thanks everyone for joining us today. I'm really appreciative. Obviously, after this, I'll turn it over to the board. But just sort of to talk about what comes next, we will, in the consecutive meetings, cabinet will meet first, leadership team will meet on Tuesday. The board will discuss this in greater detail. And obviously, you can see the sort of next steps is over the next couple of weeks, we'll get feedback based off thematic goals. And then we'll come back with the strategic initiatives identified. One thing I want to point out just real quick, some lessons learned. We were extremely ambitious in our first strategic plan. And I heard a lot of great ambition in this one as ideas that we can do. And so I actually, while I don't always quote this person, I got an email once from Steve Nelson that said from Bill Gates that talked about sometimes people overestimate what they can accomplish in 1 year and underestimate what they can accomplish in 10 years, right? And so I think that, and that's a quote from Bill Gates, I think that's fitting for as we think about the strategic plan and just to set some expectations, like it's going to take time to execute and develop some of these things. RTI took us 3.5 years, probably closer to 4 to really get up and going. And so these evolutions, these processes in order to make these things happen, they're not They're on a big ship with a very small rudder. It doesn't mean that we can't get it done. What it does mean is that we all just need to be mindful that it just takes time. And I think that's the whole point of a 6-year strategic plan, is for us to really define where we want to be in 6 years and take all of these great outcomes that you have mentioned, these great factors, these great deficits, and really chart another course for us to sort of build on. So thank you so much for being open and honest and sharing your ideas, your thoughts. Thank you to all of our facilitators today for making this happen. And I'm going to turn it over to President Wilson to close us out.
All right, thank you, Dr. Verdoff, and thank you, Martha, and your whole team for this great exercise today. I don't know about all the breakout rooms. We had really wonderful discussion, and it's neat to see how many common themes were happening across breakout groups, which really shows me that we're taking a district level lens at this and really moving away from, singular issues to our broader district and all of our kids, which is the approach we need to take. And especially as a board, when we make these decisions, it's the lens that we constantly should be looking through. So I just appreciate you all. I know it's a Saturday. This is a long meeting, but your input is valuable and it will really help shape outcomes for the next 6 years. So thank you for your time. At this point, I think the trustees can hang on if they'd like. Well, I have to end the meeting. I'm sorry. So
so you all can deliberate in a public meeting. You just have to keep the meeting going. But,
okay.
You can let everybody else go if the 4 of you want to have a discussion about this afterwards. You just have to keep the meeting going.
Trustees, I can't tell who is interested. Sure. I see Devin. I see Ellen. Okay, yeah, let's do that. So folks, we'll probably have a small discussion as a wrap up amongst the trustees. So you're welcome to sign off at this time. But again, thank you. Without you, we can't do what we do and do it well and represent you all. So your voices matter and your input is extremely valuable. So thank you for your time. With that, I think we'll move on after we give you some time to go enjoy the rest of your Saturday. The trustees will have a brief conversation. Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Martha.
Yes, welcome. Thanks, everybody, for your great ideas.
Cabinet, you can, you're more than welcome to log off too. I'll hang out with the board, or you're more than welcome to stay. There's only a couple people left. It looks like, yeah, it looks like we're all good. Everybody else is gone. So okay. Anyone who stays still has their camera on. Everybody else is sort of left.
Okay, thank you. Elephant in the room. Does anybody know what happened to Jose?
Are we still recording though? We're still live. Okay.
We are still live. Okay, well, hopefully he's okay and we'll hear from him and everything is okay with them. That was my concern. I don't know if the trustees want to kick this off and talk about their impressions about what we saw, some of the general themes. Especially after having a parent meeting that was nearly an hour and 15 minutes yesterday on a very singular site level issue, I like that almost across every breakout room. We heard that folks are not pleased when single parent issues or the loudest parents come and sort of derail some of our broader activities. So I was pleased to hear that wasn't just something that I might have been thinking or had heard from various district level folks, but that people are really, they see that happens and that the silent majority don't often get a voice. I loved all the themes. I think it's interesting and it tells me our board is pretty aligned with the community because a lot of the themes I saw presented today were very, very similar to items that we talked about I know when we met individually with Martha, so the trustees met in smaller groups with the firm running the whole strategic planning process. And it was neat to see how some of our comments aligned with those. So with that, we'll start around Robin if we want to gather some feedback and thoughts, and then we'll wrap this up.
Did anybody participate in the whole session, or did we all join for this last segment? The two of you, Devin and Tamara. Okay.
We didn't want to go over the two.
Right.
We didn't violate the Brown Act.
Oh, no, I totally understood. I just wasn't sure whether anybody had. So your comment just now about single parent issues, did that come up earlier in the day? Okay. All right. Thanks. I was only here for the last hour and mostly with my small breakout group. And I was, I don't know if heartened is maybe the right word, to see how much commonality there was among the various breakout rooms and the themes. And like you said, many of those things are things that we've been discussing and or things that are in the existing 5-year plan that's ending, but that we didn't really have the ability to address the way that we had hoped when that first plan was implemented. And I'm looking forward to more deeper implementation and more focus on some of those aspirational issues.
Other trustee comments? Devin, do you want to comment on your thoughts?
Sure. I really appreciate all of the time that parents, staff, teachers, our administrators, and our district office team, everybody spent so much time talking and thinking about this morning. The firm that was facilitating did a wonderful presentation looking at the student composition in our district compared to other districts, looking at student achievement by different groups of students over time. Dr. Rudolph, I'm assuming that presentation will be shared on our website.
It's going to be presented at the next board meeting, and then I do have the slides for it also.
Okay, so that presentation was great. And I think that because there was such a good basis to begin the discussion with, that's what shaped a lot of what people talked about. As a board member, we get to hear a lot from each other in our public meetings, and we get to hear a lot from district staff, but it is rare that we get to have discussion with our teachers and our classified staff. And so it was just so wonderful to have teachers and staff in that conversation and hear their input and their experience. I love having parents too. I'm not knocking parents, but we also get to hear from parents more readily. But as a board member, I can't tell a staff member, come talk to me. That would be a little bit of abuse of my power, right? If somebody wants to talk to me, I'm always here to listen. But I just really appreciate the facilitated opportunity to hear from our teachers and staff in the district. Something that I want us to keep in mind that wasn't a part of the discussion today, but that I definitely brought up when I talked with the firm earlier this week, is I would love to see alignment between our strategic plan, the LCAP, and our school site plans, so that we can easily tie together the work that we're doing across all of those levels. And that might be, adopting some of the language of the LCAP to frame out what we put in the strategic plan. I'm not sure, but our school site plans are really where all of this work happens, the way that we take action on these goals at each school site. And I don't think we've been utilizing them as well as we can. I don't want them to be pro forma. I want them to be really effective and useful. We spend so much time on them. So how can we align that very closely with our strategic plan and our LCAP so that it's all kind of a living, working ecosystem of goals and actions and outcomes that we're addressing?
I like that idea.
Trustee Wheeler, you want to weigh in on your thoughts?
Yeah. So Devin and I were in the same group and we agreed on everything just about. So, I won't repeat what Devin said. I agree with what everybody has said so far, which is it's wonderful to hear so much unanimity among all the groups and all the speakers. I said it, last time in our last meeting, and I'll say it here, that, I'm proud to be a member of a community who thinks like this. I also, to kind of touch on your comment at the beginning, Tamara, it was nice to be around, a lot of people who are optimistic and problem solving. So, that was real good. I look forward to our fuller discussion and presentation on Thursday. But yeah, I feel very positive about this.
So Dr. Rudolph, do you feel like you got the feedback that you need to see like how this will play out, or is this all just go back into the hands of the firm and they sort of piece this all together? I'm just curious if there's just so much there, as you mentioned in some of your closing comments, that just a 6-year event horizon could be, again, yet another ambitious enterprise. And also that's part of my first question, and my second one is seeing the overarching themes. Are these going to land disproportionately on a single department as happened last time? I'd like to avoid that.
I mean, anytime you say student achievement, it basically falls on one department. And so it's at once, Kathy's department is the largest because of just the scope of work that she has.
Yeah.
Whereas Tara's is the smallest, not because she doesn't have the same level of work, but just because her department deals more with registration and student and teachers than it does with student achievement. I think there's two things to remember. First one is as we move forward with this process, we have to end the process of having separate board goals away from the strategic plan goals, because those put value propositions in. And so, I was thinking about this as I was listening to all the stuff about ELs. And so when we focused in on reclassification, that directed Heidi to change the reclassification process and to come up with a new process to monitor how we reclassify. And that took a lot of time, but Heidi also, and this, it's no knock on Heidi, but Heidi also was the one who was responsible for culturally responsive training, right? And so every time we have new goals that show up that sort of redirect ourselves, it becomes, which one's the more important one. So I think as we think about the 6-year horizon, we should think about, sort of making sure that these items are included in the beginning, and that they, that we stage them out in an appropriate fashion so that they're not sort of overwhelming. And I think that's one of the things we learned from the previous strategic plan, because we bit off a lot more than we could chew. And that became a big thing. I think there's a lot of great things, to your first question, I think there's a lot of great things in there. I think, as we go through this process, so what happens next is we meet on Monday to sort of scrub out the ideas and try to bring a more polished version. Because right now you have all these ideas and you see some synergy there, but that has to be filtered down a little bit into 3 to 4 thematic goals. And then from there, we can start building how to achieve those particular goals. And so that's our work over the next, 48 to 72 hours, so that we can be ready on Thursday.
So I'm hearing that it's not helpful to utilize some of our board retreat time on developing new goals, which I know since my tenure on the board, we often meet and we're like,
yes, just
what are the 2 to 3 major goals that we have? And they're often are aligned with the strategic plan, but I think they present sidetrack challenges for processes that are already in place, or the trains that are already leaving the station. So is that what I'm hearing? I mean, I won't be on your next board or on that retreat, but I think it would be good to get some consensus as to how folks would like to use this time. And I would recommend, after hearing your comments and going through this process, I would recommend that the time be spent on this evaluation of where we're at and where we're going, like those batteries you used to present during board meetings, and just to make sure that we're still aligned, we still know what the goals are, we're still, effectively communicating it and not adding in a lot of new flavor of the month projects. But that's just my thoughts. Trustee Conley?
Yeah, I mean, I agree that our board time for that retreat every January or February would probably be best spent reviewing the strategic plan, our progress on it, and our next steps. I think what flows naturally from that is that the next steps are the goals for that year, if that makes sense. That the goals for the upcoming year are the next steps in the strategic plan, and that's where we can, I'd like us to maybe revise or update our superintendent evaluation too, to flow with that. So it's all of a piece, that we're working on the same things consistently across the district. We're holding everybody accountable across the district. And with that in mind, I'm going to make a pitch for like one of my favorite goals that that I would love to see us carry forward, that I think impacts a lot of areas, and we didn't get to do much on this past year, but the goal of making sure that every year, every child makes at least 1 year's growth in math and English language arts, and that our students who are behind grade level make more than 1 year's growth. Mm-hmm. And I think that is an extremely powerful goal that trickles down into so many things we do across the district. So I'm really hoping that is a large part of our movement forward.
Trustee Wheeler?
Yeah, I'm glad I'm following Devin. I actually said that in my breakout room, and it came to me after we had our, little 2-person meeting that, we finally got to the point where we articulated language for English language learners of, 1 year's growth. And it occurred to me that we had never said that for every child. And, we're dancing around. Kids get to middle school and they're not prepared for math. And we talked about, okay, we need to pay more attention in elementary school to getting kids ready, in math. And then it finally, came through that, just what Devin said, a goal that every student advances 1 year in, their subject matters, and then extra help for the students who don't. So I was also thinking about, as we're listening to all these and everything sounds wonderful, but, I'm looking at Laura and remembering, and Dev, all of you, I get, not all of you, the trustees, thinking about, my own campaign slogans. And what I used to always say is academic success for all. So sometimes, and this may be related to what we're talking about, too much on our plate, but sometimes we focus so much on one group of kids or one type of subject or something like that. And then, we lose attention to others. So, and that's what we're hoping that, everybody in the district is keeping their eye on the ball for everybody. But that's, I hope that, and I talk about this, one of the best things about our district is that we're diverse, but we should pay attention to all of our diversity.
I think what you'll see, so only 2 trustees were here at the very beginning. When you see the data presentation, I think you're actually going to be a little bit more shocked that the attention actually has been paid to all kids, There's always a perception that it's only going to one group of kids. And what you'll see is all kids actually moved steadily. But because all kids moved steadily, the gap, while it narrowed, hasn't narrowed as much, because oftentimes when you see drastic changes in the gap, it's because the top is sort of getting flat, and that hasn't been the case in our district. So, you know, you'll see that in the data presentation that she gives, but I know 2 of you got to see that, and it really was sort of eye-opening. And I think the second thing I would say is what also was eye-opening is the perception that districts actually look more like us. In reality, they don't. Mountain View is an anomaly within itself. Even Sunnyvale doesn't look as close to us as we think it does, in Cupertino. And so she illustrated that also, that we have a higher number of homeless students, a higher number of Spanish speaking students, and it was kind of interesting to see that. But that, I think her data analysis was an interesting sort of approach, and sort of gave a fresh set of eyes about all the good work that's taken place. But it goes to, you'll see, right? You'll see that like the achievement, the focus on the high end has been there, and kids on the high end actually have been improving, just as kids on the low end have been improving. So
one of the things too, when you look at that presentation, a slide that really stuck out to me was that the socioeconomic piece, the achievement gap, the starting level for Caucasians is higher, the lower end kids are higher, but the achievement gap is almost equal between them. I think it's 1 percentage point higher for socioeconomically disadvantaged Hispanic children than it is for Caucasian children. So that tells me that there's an opportunity space there that we could seize upon, and that could mean early intervention before they get to us, but always targeting our economically disadvantaged families across the board. But that was a really surprising data visualization for me, because I think that's a really prime opportunity space, and I just had never seen that. Trustee Blakely, I'm sorry, your hand's been up for a while.
No, it's okay. I agree with what you said. I also just wanted to lever off of Devin's comment about aligning the plans. And I like what you've done to make this a 6-year plan so that it does cover 2 3-year LCAP cycles. I think that was, very wise. But in terms of prioritizing things, so like how the goals get set out, I assume what we would, I wanted to check that we would still be having these sort of aspirational goals, but with the appreciation is we're not going to hit everything in year 1. And will the plan sort of stage it out a little bit more so that we can say, and this might be something where board can give direction too, in terms of the priorities of which ones that collectively we think should be focused on first. I'm just curious how you see that piece of it playing out.
I think the more we can wrap things in to what we're actually doing for the strategic plan versus items. So like if you think about RTI and the focus of bringing science on board, right? That wasn't called out in the strategic plan. What we had was a data-driven approach. But because we shifted it all to science, a lot of work had to go to bring that over. For reclassification, we started off with SIOP. Really, we started off with SEAL, then it went to SIOP, and then it went back to reclassification. And so reclassification actually was at the very beginning of the conversation. And then 4 years later or 3 years later, it came back. 1 year's work for growth. So what I would say is I think the board became better at articulating, to Ellen's point, what they wanted around student outcomes and being a little bit clearer about what that looks like. And I will say, like, the reclassification, the 1 year's worth for growth are really great goals that we should be focusing on, but it comes at a consequence to items that we had already had in the pipeline. And so we can be mindful that we have these great goals that it sort of exist. And then, you know, equity was a big thing that came up today, and social emotional learning was a big thing that came up today. So we can be mindful that those are going to fold in, but we need all these to run in concert. And then we can't have like items that sort of, and not that they were one-offs, right? But as the board sort of evolves or find its way, we can't have like, oh, here's a new goal that we should put in, and then that goal disappears. And here's a new goal that, so like Mistral was a goal 1 year for the school district, right? And so, and it's not, and it was actually called out in the strategic plan, but it became a bigger focus because, you know, it was a year goal. And so that drove, that, you know, changed the focus of everything. So I think what I'm trying to say is that if we can be a little bit more intentional, because this board has been so focused on academics and so much more focused on making sure that outcomes for all kids take place, that putting that in place before we move on is going to be a really important thing. I think when I first got here, the board was concerned about, get a strategic plan, fix Measure G, right? And it was like all these little things that sort of hung out in their own world, but they weren't really involved. And so I think that's just from experience, right? And so all I'm simply trying to say is, as we go into the thematic goals and as we think about what are the things we want to accomplish and how that impacts student outcomes, let's just be intentional about making sure that we're clear. I think the capstone project was probably the best experience of this, right? To get the capstone done would have took probably the full life of the strategic plan. And it required a lot of give and take with teachers to try and change the practice. And that's a Herculean lift within itself, because you're asking teachers, and, you know, we had to get volunteers, and some schools were on board, some schools weren't. But then but as we did that, we noticed, reclassification had to change. And so the capstone started to fade into the background because reclassification was there. And then 1 year's worth of growth came, right? And so I think as we start this time around, just really being intentional about those things. And then to Devon's point, you know, saying, okay, here's the update of where we are. What are the things that are coming up? And they're goals, but these are goals that are already sort of outlined, or the whole strategic plan, which is, we've only done this once. The whole strategic plan gets remodeled or edited, you know, as a living document so that it reflects the new items that have been brought up, and the older items are sort of pulled back or removed because it's, you know, we recognize maybe this isn't something that we can accomplish. And I think that is probably the iterative process that needs to happen at a board retreat that will make both the strategic plan a living document over the next 6 years, the LCAP over the next 6 years, as well as the site plans. But it also keeps us, you know, sort of moving towards the same outcome, which is improvement for all.
Thank you.
Trustee Wheeler?
Yeah, I'm very happy to hear this philosophy and this progress. It's what I have read and heard about successful boards and successful districts for a long time. I'm also wondering, though, we're going to have at least 2 new school board members, and it's going to take some education and agreement from new board members to understand this kind of shift to a longer term, philosophy, because it's so built into, the language of school boards and school board candidates that, we work on board goals. So, to help people understand that, the board goals are encompassed in the strategic plan.
May I also, I was
Blakely?
also going to say something like that. Not exactly, but I would like for the next retreat, whether I'm still on the board or not, there will be at least 2 new members. And I very much think it would be helpful to have at least a portion of that talk about, what is the role of the board? What is the role of the board member? The sort of governance piece and what the goals are. So maybe a little bit more of an academic chunk for that session.
And I'd like to put this out there for all of the candidates who are running who would like to serve on the board if they have not done so before, which I don't think any of them have actually done so. The California School Board Association has an annual conference in end of November, early December. So once elected, they can, through our district, quickly be registered. There's a session specifically for new board members. And then the California School Board Association also runs a Masters in Governance program, which is 5 full days of training around the role of the board and responsibilities of board members that I found extremely valuable. And it does cost money. The district does pay for it, but it is an investment that has huge returns in I think the success of our board and our school district as a whole. And so I encourage every single candidate to put it on their calendar and be prepared to take on that professional development as a board member. And then
I absolutely agree with you, Devin, but I think it's important for, because they would hear the instruction from CSBA at the new board member training and at Masters in Governance. They would hear the phrase board goals. So, what does that mean? And I think what we're saying today is we're kind of agreeing that we think our board goals should be part and parcel of these strategic plan goals that we're, getting a new start on. So, it's kind of tricky because, any board member feels this way, but I think anybody going through a CSBA thing would think, okay, now that I'm on the board, this is my goal. I have, 3 goals, or I had, 3 things I told the community I was going to do when I was elected. So it takes some, education. I think, to Laura's point, spending some time, it's going to be, I was on the last board when we had 3 brand new board members, and it was really tough. So we're either going to have 2 or 3. Devin and I are, going to try to help everybody out in Allende. But, spending some, some really good time at, the first board retreat to talk about all these things.
Yeah, and since the next board president will be agendizing all of that, I think having that education piece in there is extremely valuable, like what we're doing, the intentionality of it.
Mm-hmm.
When I was a new board member, I'm like, I'm going to do this. And it's like, you are one of 5, everybody take a deep breath. And again, the intentionality of this, because when we come up with new ideas, it can derail a lot of other processes in progress and take away the time and attention and hours of our dedicated district staff. And we have to hammer that point home. And probably it's really valuable to do it as soon as you can. And January is a great time. So I'll second that idea or third it from Trustees Wheeler and Blakely. Although I won't be on that board, I hope that this idea is brought in early and often and reiterated, so it's very clear the role of the board and what those board goals are, and that they are always aligned with some portion of this new strategic plan. Otherwise, I think it's just it's too much to ask of staff. Like, I do my work every day, and most people don't come in and go like, wait, I need 10% of your time on this new thing that it's wholly unrelated to what you're doing, or if you will. So I just think it's also respectful of staff time.
Well, and you know, agreeing with all of that, I think when we talk about, you know, it's interesting when I talk about the 1 year's growth for every child. Yes, that's an academic outcome, but there are all of these things that I think improve, like culturally responsive education increases academic outcomes, trauma-informed practices, mental health, social emotional learning. Those things make children better prepared to learn and more engaged in the learning process. So I think that if we hold in our minds, I don't know, I'm going back, I've gone back and forth with the firm that we're working with a little bit about equity. I kind of want equity to be like clearly stated as its own goal, but they keep saying we're going to infuse it in everything. It's going to be everywhere. But I don't want to lose, like somewhere we need to be really explicit about we are an equity driven organization. And that's going to infuse all of our goals, but that's, yeah, I don't want to lose. I'm trying to figure out how to frame this or explain what I'm thinking. We have this academic outcome. We also have like the whole child, social emotional learning, all of these other things. And all of them need to be informed by equity, but we need to state it explicitly over and over and not just have it be assumed.
Absolutely. All right, are there other trustee comments?
I have a comment and I want to say it to Allende. When we get new board members, you know, in November, you know, they'll start in December. You know, we say that, you know, you're 1 of 5 and you need, you know, the board power is with the majority of the vote. So 3 people or more. Want to remind Allende that part and parcel of that is when one school board member asks you to do something. That's one person, it's not the board. And, you know, don't exhaust yourself trying to satisfy one person.
Easier said than done, but I'll definitely keep that in mind.
And are we all guilty as charged, Ellen?
I don't think so, but I think some people do it more than others. You know, and, you know, we've had board protocols about this kind of thing that, you know, say in a board meeting that, you know, if there's an idea that somebody has, you know, we need majority support for it. So, and then sometimes we, you know, we get too enthusiastic about that too. But anyway, that's the main thing I want to say, Allende.
All right, I think with that, are there any closing comments from anyone before we adjourn?
I just want to say thank you for all the hard work. I'm really impressed with this firm and I'm excited about the next step. So thank you. I know a lot of that was Rebecca and Tara and Kathy and Allende and the larger teams, the principals, everybody doing a lot of groundwork and getting this going, and it's very much appreciated.
I want to say I appreciate being able to spend some time doing a short debrief just with us afterwards.
Yep, all Tamara's idea there.
I'm sorry, I missed it. My son was asking if he could go swimming. I didn't hear what was said. I'm so sorry.
I said I appreciate setting aside the time for a short debrief after the big presentation.
Awesome. Yeah, I think this is really valuable. I'm really looking forward to seeing the outcome of today in the next few weeks. So thank you, everybody. I know I don't want to keep you a minute longer. It's Saturday. Go enjoy your weekend. And with that, at 12:40, we will adjourn this meeting of the Mountain View Western School District Board of Trustees. Thank you all.